Hey, what's going on? This is Matt from Universal CPA. Big thanks to all the CPA candidates that are watching this video on written communication. Obviously, you want to learn a winning strategy and approach to knocking out this topic on the BEC section of the CPA exam. Now, before we dive into that, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you're looking for some Facebook groups to help guide you through the CPA journey, well, we run those as well. The links are in the description of the YouTube video. You can also find the link to sign up for a free 14-day trial, right? The first 14 days are on us, and you'll have 100% access to the platform. And then lastly, we're always running discounts. So please email us at askjoey@universalcpareview.com for the current discounts we're offering. Now let's dive into the video on written communication. What is written communication, and do I need to plan for it? Well, that's a question that the Universal team gets at least once per day. So in this video, we're going to talk about the critical info that you need to understand for written communication, as well as how to approach the topic and the winning strategy. So we'll talk about which exam or exams you can expect to see written communication on. We'll talk about how many prompts you can expect to see and how it's graded. We'll talk about some example prompts, and then we'll get back to that winning strategy so that when you get to the exam, it's all about execution. So written communication, well, it's only going to show up on the BEC exam. As you can see in this visual, well, every exam has multiple choice and task-based simulations, but only BEC has written communication. Now, BEC, 15% of your score relates to written communication. So you got to take this seriously. You cannot ignore it. So on the BEC exam, written communication, it's the last section of the exam. So a big question that's always asked is, how are these graded? Now, back in the day, humans used to actually grade these. Now it's all done by computers. Now overall, it's really important to understand what's the primary purpose that written communication's included on the exam. Well, it's to test whether you can write effectively, not necessarily whether you know all the specific topics that the prompt is asking about. So when I talk about writing effectively, I'm talking about, can you actually respond to the prompt, and can you have a well-structured argument or essay? Do you have complete sentences, proper grammar, the use of keywords and phrases that were included in the prompt, right? That all goes into, can you write effectively? So before I talk to you about that winning strategy, let's get a good idea of what type of prompts you could see. Now, overall, you'll be assigned a role, meaning you have to write from this perspective, and you'll be writing to either an individual or an organization. Now, what are some topics? Well, here's the list. I'm not going to read through them one by one, but this is a list of example topics or prompts in the past. And this will give you an idea as to what types of technical content you may have to discuss, right? So it's very important to understand that. But again, it all goes back to, do you have good writing skills, right? It's not about, do you know all the technical aspects that the prompt is asking about? So if you understand that, then the winning strategy will make a lot more sense. So let's dive into it. So the winning strategy, which is our mental map here, it focuses on a well-written response. So that basically answers the question, how well you can write. It's not as focused on what you wrote. The whole point of this mental map is to give you 4 simple steps to guide you through completing these prompts efficiently and effectively so that you can get as much of this 15% of the overall BEC score that you can. So let's start with step number 1, which is evaluate the prompt. So to evaluate the prompt, the first thing that you need to do is to identify your role. Are you being asked to respond from the perspective of a CFO? How about an internal audit manager? How about a shareholder or investor? If you don't understand your role, then your response won't address the prompt. The next thing to do is to identify key phrases. Now, there's likely going to be multiple key phrases, and this is where I'm talking about the technical content. You have to understand what the prompt is really addressing. So look for those 2 or 3 key phrases and pull them out. Those will be extremely important when you get to step number 2. So the final bit of evaluating the prompt is to identify your audience. This is just saying, who are you writing to? So you might be the CFO writing to shareholders. If you're the CFO and you're writing to a customer, the message could be different. So you need to understand the audience. Once you're done evaluating the prompt, you can now move on to preparing the outline. The whole point of preparing the outline is to organize the purpose, your thoughts, and the approach. So there's 3 sections to the outline. That's going to be the introduction paragraph, the main body, which could be 1, 2, or 3 paragraphs, however many you need. And then the final paragraph is going to be the conclusion paragraph. The introduction paragraph sets the tone for the entire response. And the first thing I always recommend doing is responding to the prompt. What is the prompt requesting you to do? Well, respond to that. That provides some concise direction on where you're going with your response. I recommend including some keywords and phrases from the response, and that will help you know for sure that you're actually responding to the prompt. So once you have that well organized, you can move into the main body, and this is really where the meat and potatoes of your response is. Now, it doesn't mean to write a ton. Actually, less is more in this situation, right? The whole point of business writing is to be concise. So once you've outlined your 2 or 3 paragraphs, maybe it's only 1 paragraph, you're now ready to move to the conclusion paragraph, which is where you need to really just re-summarize exactly what your argument or response was, and then nail it home. This is where you again can use the same keywords or phrases that you used in the introduction paragraph to really round out your response and your message. In my opinion, having a solid outline is critical to actually getting this done. Because if you have a solid outline, you'll have a lot of clarity on where you're going when you actually draft your response, which is step number 3. So there's really 3 things to keep in mind while you're drafting your response, and that is to stay on topic, right? Follow the outline. Only include relevant information. Don't include information that's just nice to have. It has to be relevant. And then the last thing is to be direct and concise. As I mentioned, less is more. Don't just write to write. So once you're done drafting the response, it's time to move to step number 4, which is the quality review. Now, from the grading perspective, this is super important, right? Because as I mentioned, it's how well it's written, not what is written. So the 3 things to be on the lookout for are complete sentences, proper grammar, and proper spelling. And you do get to use a spell check, so use that. And then avoid jargon and acronyms. I'd avoid them, but if you do use an acronym, at least make sure you define it, right? So those are the 3 things to keep in mind for your quality review. So that is your 4-step mental map. That's the winning strategy that will allow you to nail the written communication section on the BEC exam, right? So when it comes to practicing written communication, yes, it's important to understand the technical side of the content, but it's more important to focus on how to draft a well-written response. That's the key thing when it comes to written communication.